Thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. We're going to be talking about how school meals can support the socio-emotional needs of students. And we have a few great guest speakers with us today. And also thanks to our partners at NAESP, the National Association of Elementary School Principals, and the Harmony SEL. So before we dive in, I just kind of want to run through some housekeeping items. First, we are recording today's webinar, and we'll share out this recording afterwards along with the PowerPoint. If you have any questions that pop up through the presentation, feel free to drop them in the question and answer function. We're going to be saving some time for questions at the end of the webinar, so know that if you do drop something in, we might wait to answer that until the end of the webinar. But if you do have a quick question or something that could be addressed, in just a few words, we'll answer it right away, either through the Q&A, chat, or verbally. Yeah, feel free to comment in the chat too throughout the presentation to talk about how some of this is showing up in your school or in your work. So to start off, we'd love to just see who's joining us today. So please answer this quick poll that I'm going to put up on your screen. And also feel free to drop in the chat where you're joining us from. So I'll launch this poll. Cool, looks like we have a lot of different folks here. All right, I'll go ahead and close this one out. So looks like we got a nice spread of folks from school-based staff, district staff, state agencies. So glad to have you all here today. Thanks so much for joining. All right. So here you'll see the agenda for today. We're going to give you all a quick kind of reminder and overview of who No Kid Hungry is. And then we'll dive into social-emotional learning, covering some of these core competencies and having some back and forth around how school meals can help students with SEL with that awesome principal-teacher combo from Marion, North Carolina that I talked about. So we'll wrap up too with some next steps and time for questions. On our webinar today, we have Principal Michelle Baker and Miss Samantha Hunt from Eastfield Global Magnet in Marion, North Carolina. Principal Baker was the 2019 Regional Principal of the Year for Northwestern North Carolina, and her and Miss Hunt have worked together for a number of years to really meet the needs of all their students. On the Share Strength side, we have Topaz Arthur, our Education and School Food Manager, and myself, Thompson Birchie, Field and National Partnerships Associate. So just wanted to start off with some framing around why food insecurity is such an important issue for folks in the education sector. Kids that have reliable access to nutritious food are healthier, ready to engage in healthy social behavior, and perform better in schools. Research really shows us that kids who have access to school breakfast have lower rates of chronic absenteeism, and providing meals for students really does ensure that school staff are doing whatever they can to make sure all students start each school day at a fair common ground. All this has really become even more clear because of the pandemic. We saw a pretty big spike in food insecurity back in 2020, and we know that this has been a really tough 2 years for students and educators alike. By making sure that students have access to food at their schools, we can really kind of work to correct for some of the lost socio-emotional learning that resulted from remote education and just pandemic lifestyles as a whole. It's also important to note that food insecurity is an equity issue. We know that Black, Indigenous, and students of color do have historically higher rates of food insecurity due to historic marginalization and oppression. And providing school meals for students can really help to address the gap that exists in food insecurity across race. You can see here that the rates of food insecurity for Black and Latino students are historically around twice the rate for white students. And unfortunately, the pandemic hasn't corrected these gaps, but instead kind of exacerbated them, especially for Latino families. So this is why it's so important to make sure that our work around food insecurity is grounded in data and this racial equity perspective. So what does No Kid Hungry do? Well, we are working across different nutrition programs to make sure that kids have access to food. Pretty simple. We work with school breakfast, lunch, after school, summer meals, and also some nutrition education work for families. So since the pandemic began, we've also broadened our scope and also now work on SNAP and WIC and actually some different healthcare strategies too, to really make sure that we're addressing the needs of the whole child through all of these different levers. The way that we actually do this work, looks completely different across different programs and in each state. So the four major components that we do have always going on though are grants, advocacy, TA, and awareness. So our grants have really expanded a lot since the pandemic. We're supporting school districts, community-based organizations, and state agencies also with things like equipment, staffing needs, supply chain problems, really just trying to help with funds to get food out to communities. Advocacy has also been a really key piece of our work, especially on issues like child nutrition waivers, which we're dealing with today and trying to do whatever we can. And yeah, I actually have a little ask for everyone that I'll save for the end of the presentation. We also do TA with districts, mainly from our Center for Best Practices, and actually have some child nutrition professionals that work with us as consultants too, and are able to provide support. And then last is just this general awareness piece, trying to raise awareness around child food insecurity at the national and state levels. So if you have any questions about our work, you can drop them into Q&A or chat, or email us at the end of the presentation. We'll share emails with y'all. Always happy to help and support. So with all that as context, I'm going to pass it over to Topaz to give a quick overview of socio-emotional learning and then lead this conversation with our teacher-principal combo from North Carolina on the importance of school meals and addressing the SEL needs of children. Take it away, Topaz.
Thanks, Thompson. Again, really excited to be here today and have this discussion. So excited to have Principal Baker and Ms. Hunt and share their anecdotes and strategies with everyone. So just a quick overview, what exactly is SEL or social emotional learning? So according to our partner, Harmony SEL, social emotional learning, it is the process where students and adults can learn and effectively apply the knowledge of attitudes and skills that are necessary for becoming a healthy adult, especially when we're talking about school or students to become a healthy adult, right? So it's important that at this age, they are learning these skills so that they can, be successful and healthy adults and have, just the proper skills to function in this world that we live in. These include problem-solving skills, communication, understanding, as well as teaching children to embrace diversity and building healthy relationships that will last into adulthood. Pretty ultimately, what that means is to train others to comprehend their emotions, so understand what they're feeling and understand how others are feeling, being able to express those in a healthy way and also demonstrate empathy. All in a nutshell, that is social emotional learning. Okay. So Psychology 101, for those of you who may have had that in class, one of my favorite things actually was learning about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The pyramid, we're all very familiar with it. So obviously we know that it's broken down into our needs. And food security are very critical when it comes to meeting our needs. The needs that are lower down in the pyramid, they have to be satisfied in order for the other needs moving upward to be addressed. So we have to address food and food security, or in the school or education sector and environment, you may hear the phrase of health and wellness. They go together. So that consists of food, school nutrition, mental health, hygiene. Those are all within that category of that first need. So SEL, or social emotional learning, is broken into what we call core competencies. So there are 5 core competencies, and we're just going to go down the list of the core competencies, and looking forward to hearing Principal Baker and Ms. Hunt share and elaborate within each core competency of how they've implemented SEL, paired it with school nutrition, Schoolwide, and break it down within each core competency. So the first one being self-awareness. That is the ability to recognize your own emotions and thoughts to influence your behavior. There's no way that we can understand others and how they're feeling if we do not understand what we're experiencing and how we're feeling. It's being able to recognize your own strength and your limitations, your ability to recognize what you're feeling, notice any patterns in behavior that you're having, and also allow you to align your emotions with your behavior. That takes that's a skill, and it's a core competency, obviously. There is one of my questions for Principal Baker and Ms. Hunt going into, and they'll share how they've implemented self-awareness in their school. But one of my questions, as adults, we still struggle with self-awareness at times, many of us. So what strategies do you use to implement self-awareness for students? So just as we go into the next slide and you're sharing your anecdotes, one thing to think about and share is what you've used to implement self-awareness in children.
Thank you, Topaz, and thank you, Thompson. I'm Michelle Baker, and it's great to be here with all of you. We're really excited to share about our journey. I do want to give a shout out to our superintendent, Mr. Mark Garrett, who I saw was in the chat. And so thank you, sir, for all the support that you provide McDowell County Schools. We want to begin by saying that we are, although our name is Eastfield Global Magnet School, we are a public school. We are not a private school. We are a Title I funded school. We have almost 50% of our students are Hispanic. We have anywhere between 89 and 100% of our students are on free and reduced lunch. So we have a lot of variables in our building with trauma and with SEL that we had to really tackle. So our journey kind of really began about 3 years ago, even before the pandemic hit. Where we were seeing just a lot of students coming in without the ability to self-regulate. They did not have those self-awareness skills. They were not competent with that. And it was really chaotic for our classrooms and our teachers. When Ms. Hunt came to me 3 years ago and said, Ms. Baker, I just don't know if I can come back and do this next year. We need some help. We really started digging in as a faculty. We were seeing behaviors where kids were running, like they were leaving campus and running. We were seeing behaviors where kids were crawling under furniture and really just having quite a moment. We were also seeing behaviors of just yelling at the teachers or throwing things, high levels of defiance, and kids were really struggling. We saw that 3 years ago. So the first thing that we did was, and I'm going to lay some foundations for this slide, and then we're going to talk about how we took those foundational skills and we embedded them and leveraged school meals to help us meet those goals and those strategies and needs. The first thing that we did was we did a book study as a staff on fostering resilient learners. This is a great book study that explains why some students might behave the way they do, what could be some of those background factors. The book is written by a school psychologist and a principal. It's a union between a school psychologist and a principal. We learned a lot about adverse childhood experiences and why kids might act the way that they do. So we spent a year just educating our staff and getting a deeper understanding on what it meant to have self-awareness for kids. Our school improvement team met, and we looked at our needs assessment and we considered funding allocations, and we decided to prioritize the way we were spending our funding. And we hired a AIR room liaison. AIR stands for Alternative Intervention Room, and it is an alternative to like in-school suspension or OSS, so kids can stay in school, still get their breakfast and lunch that is provided, that we know our kids need. We also hired a behavior support specialist that uses the Second Steps program, which is scripted and provides time for students to understand what their emotions are and some strategies that they can use. to help them with their self-awareness of what's happening when they get upset or when they are anxious or have anger or are afraid, and ways that they can mitigate that. We have since taken a lot of those activities, and they do morph into our lunch and our breakfast times, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail with some of the other slides, but we have leveraged school meals to help us with that. It was very important for us as a school to have a common language. So it's not pockets of excellence, and it's not isolated into specific classrooms or grade levels. It was very important that this was a systemic practice in our school. And we'll talk to you a little bit more about some of that language with the upstairs brain, downstairs brain, and the stair climbing zone in our next competency. Ms. Hunt, do you have anything for that?
I would just like to say that as an educator, I do feel like that being able to participate in the book study that we did with Fostering Resilient Learners really changed my perspective about behaviors. It really gives you the research and the background into those adverse childhood experiences and lets you understand that those children are not a problem. They have a problem, and it's up to us as educators that pour into their lives to identify what we can do to help them.
I absolutely love the foundation and historical context that brought you to this point. It gives you a better understanding from someone from the outside looking in, giving the historical context of your school, how you came together. And I love the fact that you said you prioritized your spending. That's very important. And the fact that you took your funds and built capacity. I understand, I've worked directly in the school, so I know how taxing it could be for school staff to do not only their responsibilities, but then to also try and implement other things. So to hire outside sources who are doing the work, helping you build capacity so that you're not burning out the staff as well that you have. So that's very honorable, and that's already an anecdote to take from this session. So that's absolutely wonderful. So if there's anything else concerning self-awareness in the school that you want to share, feel free right now, or if not, we can move on to the next core competency.
We're going to continue to build on this, but we'll build on those through the next core competencies. They all kind of link together.
I love it. Okay, so our next core competency is self-management. We're still in the area of self, and that's the ability to regulate your own emotions, your thoughts, behaviors effectively in different situations. How are you able to manage yourself? This can look like impulse control. Do you have that ability to do that? Stress management, self-discipline. Some of us, you remember the Snickers commercial, being hangry. Food plays a major role when it comes to how we function day to day. If you miss a meal, if you happen to skip breakfast or something like that, it could affect you. I get hangry sometimes. I definitely do. I'm being very honest, I do. But it's the fact that you all and others as well are implementing nutrition and understand that does play a part in not just children, but in adults as well, in our everyday life. Or there are others who they'll say that they're emotional eaters. These are phrases that we hear a lot. It plays a major role in our day-to-day and how we also impact others' days, other, individuals and their day. If you're hungry and someone rubs you the wrong way, you never know what can come out of your mouth, so it's very important. So self-management, your ability to control your impulses, your emotions. How do you behave? How do you behave when you didn't get food yet? And as educators, and I'll give you this space now, it's early in the morning. You all are with students and adults for a long period of time. And sometimes students are not able to get their breakfast. Some may come late, so being able to implement self-management and teach them these skills, I'm very much looking forward into how you all implement self-management in the school.
So thinking back to when we talked about, just on that last slide, how we worked really hard to be consistent in our language and our strategies, so that no matter what class a student was in, when they were aware that they were we tell the students, you're in your downstairs brain. This is where emotions and feelings occur, and this is where fight, flight, and freeze kick in for kids. Your upstairs brain is where you do your thinking and your rationalizing. And if they are stuck down there, and they know it, like they're aware it, they know that it's happening, but now we have to make sure they know how to manage it. So one of the things that we have done is my guidance counselor and I, we go into classrooms at the beginning of the school year and we model. My guidance counselor is always the student that is having big emotions. We really try to avoid language like you're having a meltdown or you're out of control. We try to avoid those negative conversations with kids. And so we just tell them they are stuck in their downstairs brain and they need to get upstairs because this is where learning happens. And so we are teaching them to manage that through our matrix, our positive behavior matrix that we have, and with stair climbing zones in the classroom. A lot of schools call them calm down zones or chill out zones, which are fine, but we wanted the terminology that matched what we were teaching the kids. And so we wanted to make sure that kids understood that they had a place to go if they were having some big emotions for their little bodies. We're a K-5 school. So if they were having big emotions for their little bodies, they had a place to go to help manage those and climb back up the stairs into their upstairs brain. Our matrix does specifically focus on mealtime expectations. Our matrix is PAWS. We're the Wildcats. And so we use PAWS. And in the cafeteria, or of course this year the last 2 years they've been in their classroom. But we encourage students to have a positive attitude by saying please or thank you to our cafeteria staff when they get their trays. We encourage them to eat their food to show a positive attitude. We know how important that nutrition is. And we do ask students, as to show a positive attitude, not to ask others for their food. Like they need to know that there's portion size that comes from our cafeteria, it's enough for them. And we don't want them taking from another child's plate. So that's part of our matrix as well. For academic excellence, we want kids to understand that food absolutely positively ties to their academic excellence. And that when they eat breakfast and lunch, they're helping fuel their brain and their body. And it provides the vitamins and minerals that they need. We tell the kids our child nutrition staff are experts at having the right combinations of vitamins and minerals for you that you need to help manage yourself during the school day and to do your very best. And so, we really encourage kids to take a breakfast and a lunch as part of that self-management piece. And then Samantha's going to kind of share a little bit about that breakfast and lunch piece and tie it back into the stair climbing zones.
So I will start by saying at the beginning of the year, we lay a lot of groundwork for our students, even with reminder lessons for some of the upper grades. We have a lot of SEL lessons with our counselor. And that really ties into that self-awareness piece, because first they have to be aware of their emotions. They have to be able to name how they're feeling. They have to be able to identify those triggers. And then once they are aware of those emotions, then we can start teaching those self-management skills. And so we use the stair climbing zone for that. We do lessons with the stair climbing zone, and they have self-regulation strategies in those so that students are able to move from their downstairs brain back to their upstairs brain. And this is really critical, even with their school meals, because we know that food fuels their brain and their body for the day. And particularly with our area, we serve a population that does struggle with food insecurity. And so we know the importance of students coming in and having that breakfast and having that lunch. And one thing that we really try to avoid is students who might refuse to eat because they're in their downstairs brain. We really want their experiences with food within our school building to be positive. We cannot control every experience they have with food outside of our school, although we have lots of great programs to help with that. But within our building, we want those experiences to be positive. And so it's really our job to really be proactive and to keep our eyes out for those students who may come in their downstairs brain, and go ahead and immediately meet them where they're at and talk them through that and give them those strategies, let them visit the stair climbing zone so that they can have that breakfast and be in a better headspace. And then also leading up to lunchtime, making sure that they're still in their upstairs brain. If something's happened and they're in their downstairs brain, we really need to address that immediately because it is important for that breakfast and lunch experience to be positive, for them to partake in their meal and to enjoy that. That's just really critical for all students, but especially the population that we serve.
Because we found that if kids are in their downstairs brain at the breakfast time or the lunch time, they're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. And so they're likely not going to eat. They're fighting any normality or any regulation that we have in our school at that time. And so, if it's the lunch scheduled time and they're, fighting that going to lunch because they're mad, then that may be a problem. And so teachers work really hard to make sure that they are in that downstairs, that they are from their downstairs brain to their upstairs brain before they start having a meal.
Yes, because then you're going to compound whatever issue they're already struggling with hunger. And that hunger, that's a basic need, and that's going to take over. And that absolutely is going to affect the rest of their day.
Right.
And, there's this saying that says, when students don't know how to read, what do? We teach them. When they don't when they don't know the math or their multiplication tables, what do? We teach them. Even outside of the school, if a student doesn't know how to swim and we want them to have that water safety, what do? We teach them. When students misbehave, what do? And a lot of times the answer is not teach. The first thing that pops into a lot of people's minds is punish.
Right.
So we've had to have a mind shift in our building, and we've had to make sure that we're not just using these strategies, but we are teaching them to kids so that they can manage their own emotions when they're very big in the moment.
Absolutely, because if you go just straight to punishment all the time, that student or individual hasn't necessarily learned what it is. They don't understand what they did, what was wrong in that. There is no self-management. There's no self-awareness. So I think that that's excellent, and being very selective with the language that you use, even when talking and speaking to the students, using the downstairs brain and upstairs brain. I think that that's phenomenal. I'm curious as to whether or not the students, have they started to use that language on their own?
They have. And we even have parents that will come in and say, my child told me I was in my downstairs brain tonight, and so it has transcended as well to our families also. So it's been great to see.
Yes.
We do know one of the last bullets there is about a walk and talk. There are some times where the stair climbing zone does not work. They go to the stair climbing zone and they still are having difficulty managing that emotion. And so teachers can call for a walk and talk if they need to. Every teacher has a walkie. We have a team that's on the walk and talk. It's myself as principal, our school nurse, our guidance counselor, our air room teacher, which is actually a social worker, our behavior support specialist, our PE teacher, because everybody loves Coach Rock and he just identifies with every kid. And so he was important to add to this team. And even our librarian, our media coordinator, is on the walk and talk team. And if a teacher calls for a walk and talk, they continue teaching. And they just let that student just be in the moment with their emotion. Yep. The kids all know to keep going. One of us will go to the room. We answer the call on the walkie. We go to the room, and it's literally what it sounds like. We say to the kid, hey, come on, let's go walk and talk. and we take the kid out of the room. We take a walk around. When they are able to, when we can see them getting back to their upstairs brain, we will then say, hey, you want to talk about it? What's going on? You know? And once they are back in that upstairs brain, we do return them to class. I will say, I want to make sure that everybody hears us say this. Our goal is to return students to the classroom and to learning. That is our goal. So we provide the strategies, but the whole goal being return to class, return to learning. And so once a student is back in their upstairs brain, they are over it. I mean, kids are much more resilient and much more flexible sometimes than adults. But once they are back in that upstairs brain, it's over. The moment is over. And so we have to be, as the adults, we have to be able to not hold a grudge or hold on to that. And that is hard to do because we are still people and, you know, still very much in bodies with skin that sometimes gets hurt. But once a kid is in their upstairs brain, we have found they are over it. It's over. So we need to get them back to class, and then we as the adults have to move on as well for that student.
That's amazing. And that the back to class, you know, I remember growing up, and even when I was working in the schools, that time frame right after lunch was a heightened moment as well, where you never know the energy that you're going to get from the students. So I'm curious, I know you all laid the foundation of preparing the students before their meals. How have you implemented the self-management? And this will be we can definitely move on after this, but implementing self-management after lunch. You know, it's that second wind. This is the final stretch before dismissal. What are your observations or any anecdotes for that time frame?
So I think that the strategies that we use, we're really big on consistency, school-wide and then throughout the day wide. And so the strategies that we use for self-awareness and self-management in the morning are the same strategies that we implement in the afternoon. Now, the level of behaviors may change, but how we address those has to be the same. It has to be consistent, because that's really what teaches our students that these are tools for us. And that they know that this is their go-to. They know this is there for them. I will say that we do a lot of behind the scenes education with our students so that they understand that these are tools to be used when you need them. I mean, when we first started talking about it, teachers did question, like, what if a kid is just going here because they need to get out of work? You know, they were a little bit skeptical. And so we really had to lay down that groundwork for doing those lessons with students to where they understood that these strategies were for self-management. They were not, you know, get out of jail free cards. I don't have to do my work. I'm going to go sit in a stair climbing zone, or I don't want to be in this room. I'm going to do a walk and talk. We really laid, and we talked to them about the research, you know, the brain research behind it. And even our kindergarten students really do understand the importance of these tools. And so we still use those same strategies even during heightened times of behavior, because it is about consistency. It does have to be something that is, you know, the same in every single classroom, so that as students go from kindergarten up through all of the grades, they see that in every classroom, and they have those tools available to them. And so they know that they can use it every day, all throughout the day.
And we have stair climbing zones in, I mean, every room. They're not just in the classrooms. They're in the PE, they're in the gym, they're in the guidance room, they are in the speech room, they are in the art room, the music room, the library. I mean, every single location in our building has a stair climbing zone. Wow. So that it can be consistent.
That's amazing.
And support kids at any time during the day, before lunch, after lunch.
Right. It's
the last 10 minutes.
Everywhere. Right. I love that. Perfect. Nice. So we'll go into our next core competency. So coming out of self-awareness and self-management, now we're going into social awareness. And that's the ability to take the perspective of and empathize with others from diverse backgrounds and cultures, understanding social and ethical norms for behavior, recognizing family, school, and community resources and supports. And that could be examples respecting, you know, especially if you're dealing with diverse students, you have a diverse population of students, there could be religious differences, even when it comes to food. I remember growing up, I grew up in a Christian family, and there would be times where we would fast. My classmates didn't understand what that meant, and that kind of affected me throughout the day. They would laugh at me and make fun of me, the fact that I, was refraining from certain things. So being aware of what's happening around you and understanding that you are learning with other students from different backgrounds and different cultures. So I really want us to go into and hear how you all implement social awareness in the school.
So we have implemented morning meetings school-wide, and that occurs during the first 15 minutes of the instructional day. And we take that time to really focus on those character strong attributes like empathy. And this is a great time for students to come in, and they have that time to learn those character traits and to learn about the importance of social awareness. And then it also provides a time for our kids who are our little late stragglers. They still have that padded time where they come in and they're able to eat their breakfast. We are really big on breakfast after the bell. Even if they're super tardy, we still understand they need to be able to eat. And so we've really found that morning meeting time has been great for teaching those strategies about social awareness, but also giving that padded time for students who are coming in after the bell and still need that time to have their breakfast. We have a character trait every month, and our guidance counselor has been really great. We have a slideshow, and it has links to all kinds of activities and videos with lots of information. And we have a monthly character trait. Like this month, we're doing responsibility. And so that's been a really great thing to just teach those skills and the knowledge of social awareness to our students first thing in the morning.
And before we implemented morning meetings, one of the good things about COVID was breakfast moved to the classroom instead of the cafeteria, which was a kind of a positive. We look at this as the glass half full instead of half empty. When we were doing breakfast in the classroom before morning meeting implementation, we would notice that like at 8 o'clock, if we began actual content instruction, students that were tardy may not take a breakfast because they were already in content. It was already like teaching time. And so they may not take a breakfast that morning. But with the morning meeting, those first 15 minutes, it's part of our instructional day, but it's padded so that kids that are up to actually 30 minutes late, because we start serving breakfast at 7:30, but we run it all the way to almost 8:15, 8:20. And so that extra time, if a kid's running in and they're tardy, we're doing morning meeting activities, and kids are eating at the same time while they're doing this. And so if they're tardy, it's no big deal to grab a breakfast. And so that has been a really great way to increase our breakfast participation as well.
That's excellent. That is excellent. I know historically, especially, implementing breakfast in classrooms, I think there has been some pushback in other areas and locations and concerns around that. So I appreciate the fact that you all are sensitive to that and have come up with some creative ways to still implement it without necessarily having it completely affect instruction time and all of that. So kudos to you both, for sure, in the school. All right. So we'll keep it going. I'm loving this conversation, absolutely loving it. Our next core competency is relationship skills, and that is your ability to establish and maintain healthy and rewarding relationships with diverse people and groups. This can include navigating through different social environments, social backgrounds. How can you communicate? Do you communicate clearly with other people? Are you practicing active listening? Can you work well with other people? So there's so many components, and this core competency is also important for children as well. How do you interact with your peers and with those of different ages? So looking forward to hearing how you all implement relationship skills and how that looks at your school.
I think this is probably one of the strongest things, one of the strongest competencies that we're really maximizing is the relationship piece. We have a lunch buddy program in our school. And again, all of our support staff that are not classroom teachers serve as a lunch buddy. So I, as the principal, have students in my office or in the conference room when my groups are larger for lunch buddies. And it's that relationship building piece. Our PE teacher does lunch buddies during his planning period or during his lunch block. Our guidance counselor, our air room facilitator, our second steps teacher, our media coordinator, even our SRO, our school resource officer, Officer Luke, does lunch buddies. And this is really an important time to build those relationship skills. I actually have students that will email me or stop me in the hallway and say, when can you schedule me for lunch? Like they almost don't see the office anymore as that punitive consequence. It can be when it needs to be, but overwhelmingly, that's not where kids see the office. They see the office for that relationship building piece. Also, Miss Sally Coughlin, our guidance counselor, Ms. Rhonda Robbins, our air room facilitator, and Miss Lindsay Pioch, who is our behavior specialist. They will use lunch as a time to get in some of those second step skills programs or the We Thinkers program during lunchtime, so that if a student is already going other places during the day, like maybe they're already identified as a speech student or a student with disabilities or an English as a second language student, and we really don't want them coming out of core. We want them to stay in their core instruction. We don't want them missing their core instruction. And so those support staff will use lunch and breakfast. They will do breakfast buddies as a time to also help build in those check-ins with students or to deliver those strategic programs that help give kids some tools and equip them with that self-awareness and that self-management piece.
And I would just like to say, going back to one of the first slides that we saw, and it just really talked about not using food as a reward or a punishment. I feel like we've done a great job of rewarding kids with food experiences. We're not giving them a piece of candy if they're having positive behavior, but we're giving them an experience, a time to sit with others and a time to talk and communicate and socialize. And that, I feel like, has been a game changer for us. Kids would much rather sit with you and talk to you and enjoy a healthy meal with you than to be given a piece of candy. So as a teacher, that's something that I really had to be mindful of. When I first started teaching, I wanted to be that teacher that gave candy, but it's just not appropriate. It's not appropriate to mix, I don't think, those offering food as a reward whenever you can give an experience. And so I really have seen my kids just blossom with the Lunch Buddy program. They absolutely look forward to it, even especially like with our SRO, because with the demographic that we serve, a lot of our kids have had negative experiences with law enforcement in the community. Maybe they've seen something happen with their families or their parents. And so we really try to build that relationship. Our kids adore Officer Luke. He is in our cafeteria every single day eating with students. And so just using that time for breakfast and lunch to have fellowship and to build, we are a family at this school. And I think it's because we maximize every minute of the day to build those relationships, and especially during our breakfast and lunch time.
Yeah. We choose to reward time with others and with staff rather than tangible incentives.
I love that. I think that's such an interesting approach. And I love the language in terms of saying food is not a reward or a punishment, or lack thereof, a punishment. Going back to one of our first slides, it's a need. It's a need for everyone. So I love the fact that your school has implemented food as not you did a good job or you didn't do something. No, this is a need. And you're promoting experience, and experiences are long lasting. Your students are going to graduate and remember the experiences that they had at the school. Implementing and having the other partners, and that's a question that I'll definitely ask at the end, but really having the entire staff and school to buy into this. So I love the language of this is an experience for them. I used to work for Apple, and we would always say that it's an experience. People come to Apple for the experience. So I love that, and I 100% agree with that. I definitely want to make sure that we have time for the Q&A. So we're actually soon to wrap up the first portion. And our next core competency is responsible decision making. That is one's ability to make constructive choices by considering ethics, safety, social norms, potential consequences, and the well-being of self and others. So to me, it sounds like it's just the combination of all the other core competencies. And now it comes down to, what decision are you going to make? Is it going to be a responsible one? So now this can sound like some questions that someone may ask themselves before making a decision is, will this help me? How will this impact others? So not just, is it going to benefit you, but is it going to impact others? And if so, how will it? I think a lot of people make impulsive decisions, and especially, with children, I can only imagine, to take those extra seconds before making a decision to do something is very, very important. And even when it comes to school nutrition, sharing a table with someone, moving over to promote social engagement if a student is new, that I remember when it was a new student on the block coming into the school, and just to see someone just slide over and make room, that just meant the world to the student, that either made or break their first day of school. The idea of, even if it's a self-serve salad bar, you have the ability to decide how much you can take, how much you should take. Are you going to just try and take it all and forget about those who are after you? We're all hungry too. So just those things, making those responsible decisions in that moment. And I will definitely leave it to you all to share your experiences in the school with that.
So we are fortunate that we participate in the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program, and that is a grant that we receive each year through our Child Nutrition Program. So for this, we really talk to the students about, they have the choice of how they want to experience the snack of the day. And you can see those pictures there. I just adore those. They can smell it, they can feel it, taste it, they can try it, but that's their choice, how they experience that snack. But we really talk to them about how it takes multiple encounters with a food before you really do know if you like it or not. And we know a lot of the things that we're able to provide them through this grant, they might not have experienced that food at home. And so we really encourage them to try it multiple times. And it's up to them in what way they want to encounter the food. They're not required to eat it, but we do require them to experience it in some way. Also, in terms of just responsible decision making, we do have kids who are chronically tardy. And so they know that it's their responsibility when they come in. Their first thing they need to do is get a grab and go breakfast. That is priority for us, them coming in and starting the day out with a meal. And so they know that when they come in, it's their responsibility to grab that breakfast and then go to class. Of course, especially with the littles, if they come in and they forget, it's our job as teachers to remind them, and we'll say, okay, go grab that breakfast. But we do try to teach them to go ahead and grab it on your way in the door. And so those are just several different ways that they have that choice. We also, if we're in the cafeteria, we go back to that positive behavior matrix. It's their responsibility to remember, the positive behavior in the cafeteria. Remember that we say please and thank you. Remember to, ask for choices that you're gonna eat. Remember to clean up your tray. Those types of behaviors are also part of their responsible decision-making process.
That's awesome. That is, that's really important. And a question I have is, how do you interconnect the resources from the grant to your food service management at the school? So your grant specifically, you're getting fresh fruits and vegetables, and obviously I'm assuming you have to connect in some way with the the food management staff at the school. What is that partnership like in terms of if you're getting external funding or resources or food, how are you implementing that and connecting that with the school nutrition staff?
It's 100% reliant on our child nutrition staff. That grant is funded through our McDowell County Schools Child Nutrition Department. And it's not a grant just at Eastfield. Several of our elementary schools have this grant. And our child nutrition staff are responsible for preparing it. It goes into bins with the teacher's name on it. And those are delivered to the classroom. And there are enough servings for each child to have one. The children are required to touch it, feel it, smell it. They're not required to eat it or try it, but we encourage them to do that. But they do, each child must be served that fruit and vegetable. And then the teachers do try to do a little educational piece on that fruit and vegetable while they're enjoying that snack. Again, we don't want kids to be pressured not to eat the snack because they're trying to get their work done. And so teachers will try to do a little educational piece with that, give them some history about the snack or where it comes from, and some information and background, and do a little activity about that snack as well. But the child nutrition department really, really takes care of all the legwork for us on getting it cut up or ready or into the bins, into portion sizes, and bringing that to us. And they clean the bins out and prepare them for the next day. And there are some federal guidelines regarding like the temperature and how long it can sit and things like that we train the teachers on. Our child nutrition department trains our teachers on.
That's fantastic. Again, going back to health and wellness, right? Yes, food is a necessity for everyone, but also it's important what to eat. Understanding that children ultimately won't like vegetables, but finding creative ways to eat, to encourage them to eat it. And even if they choose not to, and I like that you still have to have this experience. Right. You're still going to learn about, these particular fruits and vegetables. So again, you're not trying to force the children just to eat, but you're educating them. And they can take these things home. They can say, hey, mom, dad, I ate this at school. Like, can you make this work? Can you make this at home? So it's the whole child, and understanding that what you are teaching them and taking advantage of the hours that you spend a day with them, they're taking it home as well. So I love that it's also this broader perspective of health and wellness.
Yes.
It's important to you all and to your school what your students eat, not just that they eat, but what they eat. So I absolutely love that. And those are our core competencies. This has been excellent. We are not done yet. So before we go into our Q&A, we're just going to go into how principals can help. So Principal Baker is just going to elaborate on how principals can help.
It's just really important that if kids are tardy to school, the message is not, why are you tardy? It's really important to say, I'm glad you're here. We would rather kids be here than not be here, and go ahead and encourage them to get that breakfast, and don't make them feel guilty about coming in tardy. That's extremely important for students, especially if you're at-risk population. It's important for all kids, but especially your at-risk populations.
Yeah.
Speaking to your school board is an important step that a principal can take, and making sure we're very blessed in McDowell County. Our school board actually approves universal breakfast, and universal lunch. So it's at no cost to every child in our district to have a breakfast and a lunch every day. And so we have a great school board that sees to that. But if that's not something that's currently in your district, that would be something I would encourage you as a principal or a district leader, a superintendent or a school leader, to have those conversations with your school board. And working with your school nutrition director, making sure that you do have maybe some innovative ideas for delivering breakfast and lunch to classrooms, or getting those second chance options in buildings for students. Asking staff like your bus drivers and your custodians to encourage children to eat the breakfast and invite them to join. We had National School Breakfast this week, and our child nutrition department dressed up as milk, bananas, and Friday, and they came out to our morning greeting. Like when kids were getting out of the cars this week, they were greeting them and high-fiving them and playing music and dancing with them. And they went to all the classrooms during the morning meeting time and took pictures. And I hope you've heard today in the presentation how much we've really worked to pull in our support staff and utilize those people to help encourage the meals. Just like the Lunch Buddy program, your staff that does not have an assigned home room have some availability. And that's an important way that they can partner with the students and with the classroom teacher for nutrition, which is ultimately going to help the SEL of your students and your whole climate of school. You can send letters home to parents at the beginning of the school year to make sure that they're aware of the breakfast and the lunch. We actually do parent academies at our school and invite parents in, and we do talk about like how we're engaging kids with meal service and the Lunch Buddy program. And we do talk to parents in parent academies about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain and encourage them to use that same language at home that we're using at school. So it's a true partnership. So, think outside the box with all your stakeholders in your audience, and congratulate students, joining them for breakfast during the week or lunch and being that buddy. If you're a principal or a school leader or at a district leader and have some time to come in and hang out with a group of kids and play a game with them during lunch or chat with them during lunch, that's a great way to encourage that. And again, that relationship piece is just so critical for that SEL component.
Yeah, you really touched on a question that I had specifically for you being a principal. How important is it for principals to be involved in SEL components or in that implementation school-wide? And would it look different if principals had a more hands-off approach? So in your opinion, Principal Baker, how important is it for a principal, based on your experience and observation, for them to be just as active, as you said, as others in implementation of SEL?
It's critical. I mean, the school climate, it's not facilitated by the principal alone, but the principal absolutely leads that in the building. And Ms. Hunt is here with me today because we believe in the power of collaboration. So I certainly don't think that I and myself have all the answers and can do all this by myself as a principal. But if I am not doing some of the work with them and modeling some of that with the kids, that's a huge missing piece of supporting students. And I'll tell you, as a principal, it has been a drastic change in the last 3 years in the number of referrals that are coming to my office because the students have a really deep relationship with me now. And they see me in a very different light through that Lunch Buddy program or the Breakfast Buddies or the work with the SEL. And coming to the office is not scary. Sometimes I'll have my door open. A lot of times, most of the time my door is open and kids will just come on in and just say, hey, I was just on my way to music and just wanted to say hello. And it's a game changer when you are actively involved in a part of that work and as much of a hand on the situation as your teachers are. It's a school climate thing.
Yes. We believe in being proactive, not reactive. If you put in the work to be proactive, you have a lot of less things you have to react to.
Right. It starts with the head. It really does. And then one more question for Principal Baker, and then we'll go into the next slide for Ms. Hunt. What were your strategies for getting school-wide buy-in into this SEL program and all of the different tiers and layers that come with that? How did you, if there were any challenges, you're more than welcome to share that, because this is a very transparent, I want you all to be transparent, and I want other colleagues who are experiencing similar experiences in the school to understand that this was not an easy thing. This was probably a lot of trial and error for you all. I'm sure that you received some pushback. So how do you get buy-in from the entire school and making this a shared language, a universal language within the school? Are there constantly professional development segments with staff? Just talk to me a little bit about your strategies to get buy-in from everyone else.
So first thing is this has been a 3-year process for us, and so it's living. It's a living work of like plan, do, study, act, and revise if needed.
Right.
But the biggest piece was that first year that we knew that we were worn out. We were struggling as a school. We were over our heads. Honestly, we were over our heads in what to do. I had students coming to my office that were being referred and spending days in ISS and sending them back to class, and behaviors weren't changing. It wasn't changing. Our first big piece for I like to avoid buying in because I heard once if people buy in, they can buy out. So it's more about a commitment to the belief. And so it really began with that book study. We spent that first year of transition learning as a staff first. We can't get the cart before the horse. There's no rush to this or quick fix implementation. You've got to kind of do some research and look at what's out there and understand the why before you start putting in how do you do these things. And so that was a big piece, was that book study that we did. And we did have some speakers come in and speak with us. That's kind of their expertise. We also looked at our class rosters, and we took the adverse childhood experiences, and we put tally marks beside each kid's name. Like, for example, if we know that a kid comes from a divorced home, which that's very common, but did you know that's an ACE score? If a kid is living in poverty, that's an ACE score. If a kid does not have adequate access to food after hours, like beyond the school day, that's an ACE score. If they're living in housing that is a little substandard, that's an ACE score. If there's a history of drug and alcohol abuse in the home, that's an ACE score. If they have had a parent incarcerated or a major caretaker incarcerated, that's an ACE score. If they have a parent or a major caretaker that has passed away, that's an ACE score. So we did that with our rosters, just what we knew, just alone what we knew, and we looked at our referral data. We took those two pieces with the book study, and we realized that our average ACE score in our building is 4. And anything 4 or more is significantly at risk. And
Right.
we began to really understand that it was not about misbehaving, but a response to the trauma that these kids are in. And so having some of those very deliberate data points to look at, I was having 107 to 115 referrals a year, and it wasn't getting better. Behaviors weren't getting better. So looking at that data, looking at we're overwhelmed, we've got to have something else to do, and doing that book study on fostering resilient learners, we began to have a better understanding. And I think that that's when commitment began to happen. And then we just committed through our school improvement team to make sure that we were consistent and using, it just made sense. It made sense to be consistent and use the same language.
I just want to add, there's a line from the book that has stayed with me. It says, children have not changed, childhood has. And so that's why we do see an increase in those needs and those behaviors. And so when you really look at the behind the scenes, the why of it, how can you not commit to doing what you can to help those students be successful? And we have a saying in our county that comes from Mr. Mark Garrett, and it is that we do what is best for kids, not what's convenient for adults. And when you really embrace that and understand that this is our why, this is why we are here, we don't get as much pushback because we know why we're doing it. We're doing it for the kids.
And, Topaz, I almost think, I know you were probably wanting me to address like if there was resistance, but actually I found that the pendulum swung almost the other way. Teachers were so committed. They were desperate to help kids. They were desperate to have a structure in their classroom that would work and mitigate these big emotions that kids were having, that they were committed to trying these strategies. I noticed though that teachers were almost taking on more than they should have. I had to actually come in and say, look, these kinds of things, if this or this happens, you actually need to call me. That is kind of discipline. A kid crawling under furniture and crying out, that's probably SEL. A kid that's having a knockdown drag out on the playground, that's a referral still. So it's not like we've eliminated referrals in our building. But I did have to kind of help teachers come back to the middle, because they almost took on too much themselves and they were trying to do all this work on their own. And so there is a balance there. And there are some things that are not necessarily things that kids need to work on for self-management or self-awareness. It is sometimes old-fashioned discipline, and it does need to have a different kind of conversation with students and their families.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you so much. You all are a rare piece of steak. I'll say that. Your school. I love it. So now we'll go into how teachers can help. And Ms. Hunt will elaborate a little bit on that before we go into our quick Q&A.
So Ms. Baker has been really great at being at the forefront of all the strategies that we do. She really brought a lot of those things to life in our building and started that process of us being able to educate ourselves and then being able to educate our students. But we also understand that you can have all these great ideas and all these great strategies, but you need the teachers to implement it in the building. If you do not have teachers that are committed to it, it's not going to be successful. So just making sure that you're committed to that, making sure that students get breakfast when they come to the classroom and they're tardy, making sure that you are watching out for those downstairs emotions at the beginning or the end of mealtime, making sure that you can identify any barriers that they might have to positive experiences during breakfast and lunch within the classroom or the school, especially with, understanding that a lot of our kids have a negative experience with food because they do experience food insecurity. Making sure that if kids do come in tardy, that you're not rushing them because of demands of the instructional pacing. I know as a classroom teacher how much we have on our plate and how many standards we have to teach. But we also understand that, like we talked about before, if that basic needs is not met for those kids, learning is not going to take place anyway. So if you're not making sure to go ahead and take care of those very primal things, you're fighting a losing battle. And so I would rather let my kids eat 10 minutes into me teaching ELA, but then they're ready to go for the rest of the day, than me fight them for the rest of the day because they're hungry and they're upset. So understanding where those priorities lie. Also making sure, and we talked about this before, that you are not using food as a punishment or a reward. Food is a basic need and right. I think about it like my kids have, a basic need of clothes. I wouldn't give my kids a shirt if they were good, or take their shirt away if they had negative behavior. And so I'm not going to do the same with food. And that's really where we tie in those experiences with food with our lunch buddy program and even with breakfast buddies. Also, we talked about how principals can be a voice to the school boards, and so can teachers, to implement that universal breakfast, where breakfast is served at no cost to our students. And that is really critical, I feel like, for our community, especially. Meeting with your grade level teams in your PLCs, professional learning communities, and advocating for that shared language, making sure, like we have our matrix, making sure that we are really sticking to that language and sticking to the practices that are the school-wide expectation regarding SEL and nutrition. And then also recognizing a need that a family might have. There are often times where families don't feel comfortable to share that they have food insecurity, share that they have these needs. There might be a feeling of shame on their end. And so it's up to us, like if you notice a kid comes in and it seems like there might be an issue there, build that relationship with family so that they feel comfortable talking to you. Let them build that relationship with other resources in your building, like the guidance counselor, so that you can connect them with some of those resources and assistance that they might need. And then also just really encouraging students to experience a food choice. We talk talk a lot about that and have those beautiful pictures of our kids experiencing their fresh fruit and vegetable, but you can also do that with breakfast and lunch choices as well. So that students do have experiences with healthy, balanced meals. We do understand that they might not have as balanced or healthy meals outside of the school. So they might not have experience with that food. They might be resistant to try it. So just really let them start building those experiences, because it does take multiple encounters to try something new before you really know if you do like a food.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. We do have room for a couple of questions really quick. One of the questions that was posed in the chat is from Paolo. Paolo asked, what do comparable approaches look like in middle school and high school? What is different in those settings?
Well, I mean, I can just speak as a parent. I have an elementary school daughter, a middle school son, and a high school daughter. And let me just tell you that when it comes to SEL, they are very much the same. Those issues are the same. Their needs are the same. They need those self-regulation strategies, because at the end of the day, you know, as much as we do want kids to become more and more responsible, middle schoolers and high schoolers are still children. They are still learning the type of adult that they're going to be. So they still have the need for us to educate them and to help provide self-regulation tools. I really think about like the craze with fidgets in the last couple of years. Middle schoolers and high schools love all the little fidgets, and I really think that they're just craving those self-regulation tools. You know, we try to start that foundationally at the elementary school level here, and hopefully they'll carry those tools throughout middle school and high school. But we do need to be aware that there are kids who have not had the experience of the things that our students have. And I wish that for all kids. I wish that all, you know, schools, middle school and high schools have those. I mean, a little stair climb in some room, it doesn't take up much space. We have so many things that are free or super cheap. Even high school kids need to step away sometimes. Even high school kids could, you know, benefit from a walk and talk with somebody in the school that cares about them and cares about what's going on. So I do feel like that, even though, you know, we're talking about from a K-5 experience, this is absolutely something that applies to middle school and high school as well, and able to be implemented at that age.
And I'll tag on to that to say McDowell County Schools is pretty systemic. We have an elementary principals meeting once a month where all of the elementary principals meet together beyond our leadership meeting. Like those of you that are district or principals, you know, the leadership meeting that happens with your superintendent and all the directors, that's one meeting. But then we also have an elementary principals meeting, and there is a secondary principals meeting. And so that is a forum where these strategies are interwoven and discussed and shared. And almost all, I think all 8 of our elementary schools currently have finished the Fostering Resilient Learners book study. I think that's something that all the schools have adopted. And I think we're all moving to the same language where we're calling it upstairs brain, downstairs brain, and stair climbing zones, so that they can get back upstairs. I think all of our 8 elementary schools are using walk and talks. And I know that there have been conversations at the secondary level. So for the person that asked the question, the more consistent and systemic you can be with common language in your school, in your span of alike facilities, and in your district, the better off kids are going to be. Because it's a seamless transition from one, and we have a lot of transition. We have high transition in our district. And so kids may start off in one elementary school and then they go to another school, elementary school, and then another one. I mean, we could have a kid that's been to 4 elementary schools in the 6 years they've been in school. And so the more systemic you are in common language and common practice, the better off kids are going to be.
Wow, thank you for that. One more question, and then just a few other housekeeping announcements at the end. This has really been great, by the way, and I'm loving the energy from the chat. People are really enjoying this webinar and the information that they're receiving. Another question is, have there been any benefits in incorporating meals into the classroom? Have you found that there's more, you're able to engage more with the students? Just talk a little bit briefly about some of the benefits that you've experienced during this time in incorporating meals in classrooms.
So just as a classroom teacher, I'll say when we first found out we were going to have meals in the classroom, you know, the first thing that came to our mind was, oh my goodness, the mess. But then it was like, oh my goodness, the the socialization, the time for kids to have a meal, but be able to talk to each other. And then also it really cut out too on a lot of transition time. You know, we found that we had, you know, more time to sit and talk and eat and enjoy because there wasn't the transition time from the cafeteria to the classroom, you know, back and forth. And so I really came to love having the meals in the classroom because it did cut down on that transition time. It did allow for just a more, you know, relaxed environment, and kids were able to sit in their groups together and talk. And, you know, we would do things like a cartoon lunch maybe on a Friday to let kids talk throughout the week. And then on Fridays, they got to choose if they wanted to have a cartoon lunch, just little special experiences like that. And so we have really enjoyed having breakfast and lunch in the classroom. And then, you know, especially it has been crucial for those kids who were tardy, because everybody eats breakfast in the classroom. It's not just me coming in and eating breakfast because I'm late every day. And so that has really, you know, helped them not to feel like they stand out. So that to me has also been really crucial for our kids to make sure that when they come in tardy, that they're still comfortable to get that breakfast, because it's not like someone's coming in with food in the classroom. Oh my goodness. We all eat breakfast in the classroom. It's no big deal. They come in, they sit down, and they start eating, and they feel comfortable to do so.
And, you know, we have a really old building. And so we have vaulted ceilings in our cafeteria, and it's all glass. Like there's glass all the way around it. So the acoustics are horrible. It's very loud. The cafeteria is very loud. The cafeteria, sometimes because of default of so many kids in there at one time, has a little bit more of an institutional feel to it. Kids were only able to talk to the person next to them. That was the rule on our matrix, on our behavior matrix. They could only, if they were in the cafeteria, they could only talk to the person beside them or directly across from them. Because if they were talking, you know, 3 or 4 people down on the bench style table, then it was too loud. And the roar of noise coming out of our cafeteria was so loud. And so they could only talk to just those 3 people. That was their option, only 3. The classroom has a little bit more of a restaurant feel to it, or a family table meal feel to it, because there's, instead of having 100 kids in the cafeteria at once, now there's only 18 kids in the classroom. And they automatically bring their voice down to that level 1 expectation, because it's what's been happening all day anyways in the classroom. And so, and it has given them more freedom to socialize and engage with their class instead of just the people beside them or across from them.
Yes. And so, I saw the question in the chat about like, how do you get custodians to buy in because it makes more work for them? It doesn't, because that's where we teach that responsible decision making. And so students are responsible for cleaning up from breakfast and from lunch. So it has not translated into more work for our custodians at all.
Our second shift custodian drops off the large trash bags. He drops a roll off to each teacher. And when the kids are done, they just put their breakfast and lunch in that large trash bag. We did buy some extra rolling trash cans that are in our hallways. And so each class bags up their breakfast or lunch meals, and then they just put them into the trash can. And then our custodian just comes around with the cart. We bought him a big cart, and he comes around with the cart and he takes those bags out of those rolling trash cans and then off to the dumpster. And I did buy the teachers Swiffers and Swiffer pads, because accidents do happen, especially with little bodies. And so I did buy the teachers some Swiffers and Swiffer pads, and they can do a quick spot clean if they need to, if there's an accident right there. But the students know to manage, the students do know to manage that and be responsible for that. Throw their trash away, wipe down their area. It's been very easy to manage.
That is excellent. And it goes back to capacity, you know, and the responsible decision making, so that we're not burning out other staff members. It all comes together. This has been so rewarding listening to you both, seeing the collaboration. It is so inspiring. We have a few other, I know you just answered, Ms. Hunt, that question, but feel free, if there are any other questions that come, we'll definitely be sharing that out in our follow-up email to those who have attended. And you all, this again has been phenomenal. So just a quick announcement, for those who attended today are being school-facing staff is being entered into a raffle for a chance to win one of the SEL toolkits that also Ms. Principal Baker and Ms. Hunt use at their school, which is Second Step. The great thing is that it's available for either elementary, middle, or high school. So if you are a winner, you will receive an email from us, whatever email you use to register. You'll be contacted and notified. So we're really excited about that. Thank you, Principal Baker. Thank you, Ms. Hunt. Thank you again to NAESP and Harmony SEL for this series. We hope you all have enjoyed yourself today, and keep an eye out in the next few days for a follow-up email with all of this information and some additional information as well. Thank you so much. Thompson, you have anything really quick to wrap up with?
No, we'll just stop there. I'll send some resources and everything afterwards, everyone. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.